The Secrets of Technology is brought to you by the StarQuest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to The Secrets of Technology. Hi, I'm Dom Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of Technology, where we discuss the technology news that's important to you from a uniquely Catholic point of view. And joining me today on the panel are Thomas Sinherho. Hi, Thomas.
Hi, Dom. How's it going?
Very well, thanks. And Father Michael Gossett. Hi, Father Michael.
Hi, Dom.
So we get together again this time, and we're talking about technology. And as we were kind of talking about before we started, you know, a lot of shows, a lot of websites, a lot of video channels on YouTube talk about the big hot news and the expensive gadgets that no one really can afford anyway. But we like to talk about issues and things in the news that might be a little more complicated. Sometimes you kind of need to wade through it a little bit to get to what it's really about, but also that affect people like you and me and those of us on the panel and people who listen to this. So so that's one of the things we're talking about here is that there are two big stories of the week, and our first one is this story about Facebook and that several governments, not just the American government, but the British government and Australia, they don't want Facebook to implement end-to-end encryption in their platform, in their messaging. So Facebook Messenger, and I'm assuming they also mean WhatsApp, since Facebook owns WhatsApp as well. So the key here is they think that Facebook earlier this year came up with this big privacy thing, and we're going to be all about privacy now, which, you know, welcome to the party, Facebook. We're going to be all about privacy, and one of the things they said was they're going to put end-to-end encryption on Messenger. Thomas, can you explain quickly what end-to-end encryption means for the average person?
Sure. I think end-to-end encryption basically just means that I am going to produce a message and it has an intended recipient, and there is a method by which we can encrypt that message so that only the intended recipient can open it. And it's through a system of public keys. It's already in place on the internet in a large way. The HTTPS that a lot of people recognize uses end-to-end encryption, basically. And so what we're talking about now is just a message system, so that from my typing the message until the time it is opened by and read by a recipient, it has that same level of encryption, which is your computer has it with a server already. And so this is not a big step. It's just making sure that it doesn't sit on a server and can just be yanked off of a server with no effort.
Okay, that's a good explanation. Yeah, and right now, people, if you have an iPhone, you have end-to-end encryption between you and people that you send iMessages to. So the blue bubble people, that's a big distinction. Other people have iPhones. If you send it to people who don't have iPhones, like Android phones, that is not end-to-end encrypted. But internally, and so what that means is, when you send a message, you can read it, the person on the other end can read it, but Apple can't read it. They have no way of opening that message. They don't even have any keys on their server that they can access to open it, and that means that they can't give governments the ability to look at it, law enforcement or whatever, because they don't have the key. Even if they get a subpoena, there's nothing they can do. So that's an important point. And now, so what we have here is we have Facebook coming along and saying, you know, we want to do this too. We would offer this service, and these governments are saying no. Or if you do it, you have to do it in such a way as that you have the ability to let government look at these messages if we give you a legal order. So let's look at the arguments on both sides of this. Why? So first, let's say, why should Apple and others be able to do end-to-end encryption, but not Facebook? Because there's lots of other ways of doing it out there: Signal, Telegraph, etc. So if people can't do it on Facebook, they'll just do it some other way. So why do you think they're focusing on Facebook, Father Michael? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I wonder if, as you said, there's two sides to this, and I wonder if it's the the kind of use that they're seeing from Facebook, that wanting to track. I mean, like, the reason they want to get into this stuff, at least in the best sense, is to stop people from doing bad things. And if they see that maybe Facebook would be the place, particularly Facebook Messenger, a place where people are talking and communicating to commit crimes, to hurt people, that maybe they see that as a particularly dangerous avenue from that side of the argument.
That's true. Also, Facebook has 2 billion users now. I mean, it's got some ridiculous proportion of the planet as users. So that would be an element in, it would grant end-to-end encryption messaging to a much larger population than already, I suppose.
Yeah, I think they've already seen attacks on Facebook too, in that more generalized sense of like the Russian groups that moved through Facebook and made all the fake news, and so I think there's already kind of a focus there. And it's interesting though, because Facebook is just the one that's like easy to put your finger on,
right,
and kind of say this is the problem. But there's no reason why someone couldn't just send a connection from Facebook, like through an email, an encrypted email to the person, that with another connection point. And so it's really not, there's nothing inherently open about Facebook, honestly.
Right. I mean, Facebook is the reason they're going after Facebook is it's the wounded gazelle. You know what I mean? It's easy prey right now. They've got caught red-handed, hand in the cookie jar, all the similes you want to use, where they screwed up and let these Russian bots and all these other bad actors get access to people's data, influence the 2016 election, all this bad stuff. And so Facebook is trying to recover. And I think you have a lot of these government officials saying, look, they're trying to backpedal and, get some cred back. Let's make it costly. Let's get some of what we want out of them before we, they get all that back. So there's that. So I want to talk about, the two sides of this end-to-end encryption debate. Like, first, what's wrong with allowing government to have the subpoena, like this backdoor technology, so that if they submit a subpoena, they get specific access to somebody who might be planning something bad? Thomas, I know you have an opinion on that.
Oh yeah, I have a very solid opinion on this.
Yeah.
It's terrible because that's not what's being asked for. And that's what it's always going to be framed as. It's the well, if you're not doing anything wrong, you don't have anything to worry about argument. And that's not what's being asked for. What's being asked for is an open door to all of this information that does not have to be subpoenaed technically to get to, that does not have to be go through any review process to get to. That the door is just there and it is completely unlocked. It's like, we'll put a door there that's a screen door, and we can just stand at the screen door and watch you, right?
Right.
And so that's basically what's being asked for here. And the comparison that's often made is one to wiretapping a phone. Like that's something that everyone's always been able to do. It's just like wiretapping a phone, but it's not just like wiretapping a phone. It's like having a faucet that's already tapped to this person's connection that you can just turn on and start getting information from.
Right.
And that's dramatically different than having to physically go to a location, clip into the location and listen in, because there's a lot of systems in place that you have to go through to get the rights to do that. Whereas with this particular type of tap, it would just be Joe in the office can just go, oh hey, let's see what's going on with my ex-wife's internet account right now. And I'm not saying that the organization should be responsible for that, because obviously the person is at that point, but to have it that easy, that's a problem.
Do you remember a few years ago where it came out that NSA's, the top hacking tools, the tools that they use to get into systems, and were accidentally leaked out into the wild? And then, Snowden character who got out there and revealed all the NSA secrets. The fact is once this door is there, it won't be just the law enforcement and the quote unquote good guys who have it anyway. It will get out. It's just the nature of this thing. Once the tool exists, everyone will have it. And that means that then some Russian mobsters will be able to hack into your messages and that sort of stuff. And then there's the question of what happens when China demands access to this end-to-end encryption. and they start looking at messages of, say, I don't know, NBA executives, team executives, and looking into their private messaging and then demanding
or real
stuff
estate agents that they're trying to make real estate deals on with
right.
all of their things here. So
it's
a really scary thing that I think the typical argument of if you don't have anything to hide, then you don't have anything to worry about, it does not apply at all. And we're living in an age of big data, and we tend to forget that big data means the more data that is available about us, the less secure we are. And what you're asking for here is to leave a backdoor open that allows all of the data to be available about you in this particular arena. Right. And that's the way it's going to be used, because it costs nothing to warehouse data. You just put a tap on it, suck up all the data, put it in storage until you need it, and then you can go back and sort through it really, really quickly and get everything you need from it immediately, which is not how a wiretap works. Wiretap doesn't like tap your phone 5 years before the case started.
Right.
It taps your phone once the subpoena starts, and it has a limit on how far it can go.
I mean, privacy, the desire for privacy is not prima facie evidence of criminal activity or criminal intent. The fact is, we should want our information, our innocuous information, our banal information about us to be private, because privacy there should be some constitutions, state constitutions, not our federal constitution, but some state constitutions have a right to privacy written into them. The idea that we should be able to sequester part of our life that's just for us or those we closely designate, there's nothing wrong with that, and again, it's not a sign of criminal intent. So I appreciate that argument. Father Michael, do you think about what's the other side of the argument? I mean, what's wrong with letting the government, what's wrong with encryption? What's the government's argument in the value in it? What's that having this type of encryption easily available out there is bad? I mean, is there much to that argument from your point of view?
There's an argument there. I think you could say clearly, we just look at since 9/11, and the great fear is someone's out there communicating about doing something terrible like this. And if we can do something to stop it, we should do everything to stop it, or do anything to stop it. I think that's definitely the fear that's there.
Right.
And I don't agree with it. I think it's, especially when you look at our phones and our social media and how tied in it is to every part of our life, not just our bank, which is really serious, and our money and finances and things like that, but just you talking to your wife and talking to family members and all that, just all of that is there. And like Thomas said, they don't have to look at it right now. They can go search through it later when they decide to. But I think what makes arguments like this appealing is when we point to the fact that there are terrorists using WhatsApp or terrorists using end-to-end encryption to communicate. Yeah, that is absolutely true. And it's we have to find a way to fight these things without making everybody a suspect, because that's what it turns into.
Right. They didn't, even in the old days, they didn't have access to this sort of, crime fighting tool. The old shoe leather, getting in, doing undercover work. There's all these other things, and it's just a matter of there has to be a different way. I mean, there's so many laws about privacy. I can't, with the HIPAA laws, I can't see my wife's prescriptions at CVS. I can look at, I could take handle all of my kids' prescriptions, but because of the HIPAA laws, there's not even a way for her to say, no, I'll sign a thing, and I want my husband to be able to see my prescriptions and me see his. Nope, not allowed. We're not going to do that. And it's okay, so on the one hand, we have these sorts of privacy laws, but we don't have the sorts of things to protect us from the government. And that's and if anything, that's who you got to be. As the Revolutionary War showed us, that's what we need to be protected from.
Right.
That's what America's founded on.
Yeah, and I think one thing you don't think about here is the kind of access that some of these things have on your phone without you knowing. And it wasn't very long ago that we were talking about the fact that Facebook had tapped into the microphone,
Right.
and was able to record things from the microphone. So just scenarios here of thinking about the seal of confession, and it can completely be broken by somebody having an iPhone in their pocket and walking in and confessing their sins to a priest. And now that can be admissible as evidence because it wasn't gained by the person or the priest whose the seal is between, but it was gained by looking at phone records that were gleaned from these Facebook, trawls for information.
Mm-hmm.
So.
It makes you wonder whether priests should, put their phones into airplane mode before hearing confessions, or what do you think, Father? Do you think about that?
I was going to ask that question from people that might know better than me. That is what I do. Is I put my phone into airplane mode. But like Thomas just said, it doesn't even matter if the other person and so many people, their phones are ringing in when they're confession, or they're reading their sins off of their notes app or something.
Mm-hmm.
Does airplane mode make a difference? I want to put that question out there.
Yeah.
I think
it's been interesting to me because my Google, my OK Google, my Google Assistant has up there it went. It has been picking up on things that I've been saying randomly in the classroom lately, which is a whole other issue. See, now it's talking to me and everything too. So it's a scary thought. Like, it's a scary thought to kind of think like how often and how much our phones are listening to us.
So don't put an echo in the confessional. That's just right off the bat. That's a basic. I think airplane mode, you're probably okay. Someone would have to be specifically trying to circumvent your phone, and so you would have to be targeted. Which again, a priest and who has particular parishioners, that may be a factor.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it might come down to priests should leave their phone. Maybe not bring their phone into the confessional. And maybe informing the people going to confession that you may want to put your phone in airplane mode before, how sometimes confessionals have little signs that might be a part of the sign for certain parishes or certain places, maybe, or a place like a little lockbox to put a Faraday cage in the confessional for you to put your phone in. I mean.
Mm-hmm.
I have used a confession app where you catalog up your sins, and I download it. I do the cataloging. I turn off the Wi-Fi and the cell data before. Then I catalog all my sins, and then I delete the app at the end. And then before I turn anything back on, I mean that may not even do any good. There may still be some kind of cache file on there or something.
Yeah.
So. It makes you think, that that these we carry, and then there's the watch. Do the watch some of the watches have microphones and connect to our cellular and that sort of thing? I mean, I don't think the church has thought enough about this sort of thing, but I think maybe there's somebody either at the Bishops' Conference in D.C. or at the Vatican should be thinking about what sort of guidance should we be giving to both priests and the people about, specifically confession, but also spiritual direction and other private moments. I wonder what I wonder what lawyers do with their clients. I know that in the military, I've been to the Coast Guard Station Boston with the Cub Scouts. We did a tour, and before going into the secure communications office, there is a box where you slide your phone and your watch and anything else that is electronic into. It locks, and you take the key, like a bus station thing. And you take the key with you, and then when you come back out, you get your stuff out of it again. I don't know. Maybe that's something. I don't know. It's an interesting question. I'd like to hear what listeners think about that.
Absolutely.
All right. So that's a good discussion. I like how that ended up. So let's talk about our second topic of the week. This is an interesting one. So libraries over the past couple decades have public libraries have really moved to really offering people ebooks as a way of checking out books. Ebooks is a big thing. Everybody loves ebooks now, Kindles and various other devices, and there are several apps now from libraries, Overdrive, Hoopla, what have you. They all allow you to check out books. Now, one of the things to keep in mind is the way libraries acquire books is different from the way that you and I, as consumers, might buy books. There are different restrictions on them. Even when it was just, a physical book that, they buy and it comes from the publisher, they usually paid a lot more for that book than you or I would at the local Barnes & Noble. They still exist. There's a few of them around. Brick and mortar bookstores. And the reason is the publishers knew that when you buy a book for yourself, you read it and you might lend it to a friend. But usually it's one or two people read it. When a library buys a book, 10 people, 20 people, 30, 40, 50, 60, 100 people might read that one book. And for them, that's all lost sales. That's the way they look at it. And so they would charge libraries more, knowing that given the limited number of people that can read a physical book at a time, one person at a time, they don't lose too much that way. All right, so let's skip ahead to ebooks. There's a fight brewing between publishers and libraries, where publishers want to put more restrictions. One of the newest things, one of the big publishers wants to say, when a new book is published, libraries may only buy one ebook file for the first 8 weeks that the book is released. And so, if you're the New York Public Library, you have one copy of the latest James Patterson book on there, or Margaret Atwood's book to be checked out. And everybody else has to be on a waiting list until that first person is done. And of course, libraries are balking at that and saying, that that's not fair. Like we provide a good service. So we already pay a much higher price. And in some cases, they pay metered access, which means after the book is checked out so many times, they have to buy the book again. So there's compelling arguments on both sides. I just want to first lay this out to you. What do you think of this? What are your book habits first? Just, do you buy books? You check out books from the library? Do both? What do you do, Father Michael?
Well, my mom works at the library at Franciscan University, so and my sister's a librarian too. So
awesome.
Librarians in the family, and a lot of appreciation for the library. I find myself lately, I just got Hoopla, so trying to use that more often. But for a lot of newer, because I read a lot of newer sci-fi books, I'll get it on Kindle just because a real priest problem is too many books, and yeah. I'm trying to really fight that problem and not. So it's much easier. It's easier to fill up the Kindle or read. I read them on my phone, honestly, more than even on the actual Kindle. But definitely trying to make use of the library more because, like you said, it's a service, and I want to make use of that service in my town. Not just because my family's been involved with it, but it's just a positive thing. It's good to go to the library to experience things that way, rather than just finding the things that I'm looking for. You're just seeing what strikes me, and so I like that a lot about a library.
How about you, Thomas?
I am definitely a library user. 7 kids and my wife, as a former librarian, we are at the library all the time. And we're very up on the digital tech that our library offers. I think that's one of my weekly recommendations from a few weeks back. And it's a great way to be in books, but not be burdened by them, at least not more than we are. Because like you, Dom, I have several bookshelves full of books.
Yes.
So that's a common problem around our house. And I'm a notorious rereader. So I will read a book 3-4 times before I'm really fully done with it. I've read a copy of Dune that's made circulation in my house. I've read it 20 times, and I keep loaning it out to people, and it keeps coming back to me. Thankfully, I keep getting it back. But yeah, it's so there's I read a lot, and so I very rarely buy books. But if I do, I try and get them cheap from from a resale or from like Friends of the Library will have sales every once in a while at the library where it's just getting rid of old books from the library, and I'll buy those. But yeah, I'm definitely a library user.
I for myself, while Father Michael was talking, I was waving my hand around on the Skype call at my shelves that surround me with books. My house is full of books. Both my wife and I are book lovers, and my kids have become such, and I'm very pleased by that. I buy books that I read for myself. The the books I want tend not to be available from the library, even with interlibrary loan, for whatever reason. So it, but I try to buy them on sale and that sort of thing. And I'm almost entirely ebook or Kindle, even, just to be more specific. Whereas my wife and my kids are huge library users, and I encourage that. We go down the library all the time. Our local library, we're in a little town. The kids have read nearly everything worth reading in the kids section. They have a huge anime section, which is a lot of fun. Manga and anime and that sort of stuff. So it's kind of a neat thing that they have there. So I worked at the public library in my town growing up in high school. So I have a great affinity for libraries. But there are arguments on both sides. I get this. So publishers say that, people lining up to borrow ebooks are cutting into their sales. And they also say that most people have an unrealistic expectation of the cost of making books. People say, well, why should a Kindle digital file cost as much as that paper book? You don't have to cut any paper or print any ink and ship it. And the publishers respond, that part of making a book is actually a tiny sliver of the overall cost. Marketing is probably a huge part. Editing, the money the author gets, all that sort of stuff. So, but consumers are this capitalism at work is driving the cost of ebooks down and cutting to the bottom line. And so that if they keep losing money to these other things and they blame public libraries, they'll have to cut back on the authors they'll be able to publish. We'll only have to go with ones that we know are going to bring in a good return. And all of these emerging authors who are unknowns and mysteries and gambles we're less likely to do. What do you think of the publisher's arguments in this case, Thomas?
I'm going to go with the jaded view. I'm not, I try not to do this, and especially in the case of like writing, because I read a lot. I'm interested in becoming a writer at some point. I would like to be writing, so don't take this the wrong way, publishers. But ultimately, to me, this looks like, and the librarians were very nice in the article. And not taking this angle, but they did mention the fact that they have statistics that show that their readership tends to buy more books, exactly. Which is absolutely the case. So I am seeing this argument from a completely different perspective here. We're watching these publishers get a whole lot of free marketing by putting one copy of their book in the libraries for 8 weeks. And what happens in their minds is everybody sees how popular our book is for those 8 weeks, and they can't wait for 8 weeks to go get a copy. So they go and actually buy their own copy. And that's like, I can see that going on in the heads of, the marketing and business moguls that are running the heads of these publishing companies.
Right. They look at the New York Public Library and the wait list for Handmaid's Tale, say, whatever the new Margaret Atwood, that's the number one on the bestseller list, so the Ta-Nehisi Coates book. The wait list has probably got 500 people on it, 1,000 people at the New York Public Library. That's 500 or 1,000 copies of that book we could sell.
Right,
is what they're thinking. Right. Except it's just that's not how economics work. If they can't, it's not completely transferable. If they can't get the book, a very large number of the people who are on that list won't go and buy the book. They'll read something else. It's not that inflexible, I think, is the economics term. But on the other hand, you kind of hit the other point, which is people who patronize libraries are by and large people who buy books too. They buy a lot of books, by and large. So taking those people off is probably not a good idea either. Father, what do you think of this argument?
Yeah, I think that last point you made is the real one. People who read and people who go to libraries and take a lot of books out are just as likely to buy books. And I am guilty of that on so many levels, but it's because my parents took us to the library almost every weekend as a kid that like I have so many books that I own now that I paid money for. And so I think they're maybe, I don't know, missing their market or misunderstanding their market, that you're not just getting some random person who walked by the library and took this book out. I was like, well, now I don't need to spend any money on it. You're getting the people that are interested in buying books, and that's why they go there to find things. And it's just kind of a sad thing that like I assume the book industry is probably hurting
Yes.
these days, and it's sad to see that something like this would get in the way of promoting books to people that really care about them and want to buy them.
I'm going to go out on a little bit of limb and say the reason the book industry is hurting is not because people are borrowing books from the library instead of buying them. What's hurting them is there's so much junk that they're publishing. They're so politically correct with what they do publish that a lot of people are not bothering to buy their Trek anymore. And so the market has been flooded with junk. I mean, we have more books published every year now than that people aren't reading. So, maybe it would be better if they published fewer books like they're threatening. And I've kept up on some of these other controversies that aren't really tech related, but are more book related on some of the political correctness controversies and the things like a woman of Asian descent who wrote a book about that referenced slavery of some sort, and it wasn't really about African American slavery. It was a science fiction book or something, but because she's Asian, she doesn't have a right to talk about slavery, and it was just this crazy thing. And people are watching this, going, I don't really want to deal with that. And I'll be honest, it wasn't last year, the year before. I tried to read the Hugo Award winners for the science fiction awards. I couldn't read any of them. I think I finished one of them. They were all just so bad, so like full of junk. So it's my tangent rant. I think the problem for the book industry is not that the libraries are the problem. I think libraries are your solution. I think libraries are underutilized in our society now, and I think they need to be promoted. We need to have more of it. In fact, I've talked to my wife. I've had my ideas that I think libraries should become public-private corporations where they do money-making ventures to keep themselves operating. I've long said that our library should have a coffee shop that sells coffee, like a Starbucks sort of thing, Why not? I mean, people go in, they read books. Yeah, I mean, that's perfect. So anyway.
Make it feel like a bookstore,
Yeah. And they become community centers, and there's much more going on in libraries than just people checking out books. So I think as I dug into this story, there are so many issues related. It's not just this 8-week thing. That's just the issue they've chosen to focus on. But there are some other ebook related issues like they charge extra. Every publisher has a different set of limitations, which becomes very difficult for these libraries to keep track of, and and very expensive. And so the libraries have difficulty. Their libraries are having their budgets cut nowadays. Their budgets are getting smaller, and so their budgets for buying new books are getting smaller, and yet the books are becoming more expensive, and that becomes more of an issue. So it's a tricky one. Hopefully, the American Library Association is able to gather enough oomph behind this to push back, because that's my point. My point is libraries are a public service, especially for people who can't afford to buy books. And I think anything we can do to help them, and they are not a burden on the publishing industry. That's my bottom line.
Mm-hmm. It really does. It seems to me like it's just free advertising. Like that, honestly, 100% looks like they're not only are they trying to get the free advertising, but they're also trying to charge for it, So It's like, here, advertise this book for us and pay us in the process. It sounds like taken from both sides.
It's somewhat, I mean, it might be that the publisher's looking at Hollywood and saying, look what they can do with movies. Mm-hmm. They have a new movie comes out in theaters. Okay. So right there, you can't stream it on Netflix or Amazon or any of those places while it's in the theaters. Oh, and now it's available streaming, but it's only for purchase. I'm sorry, you can't rent it for another 2 months. Right. And now finally it's available for rent. And it's like, and so Hollywood, they maintain a little bit of this initial monopoly and create this artificial restriction on availability. Which they could release it. Netflix does with its original content. Day one, everybody can watch it, no extra cost. It's part of the service, and that's what I think a lot of these other industries are looking at, going, Yeah, I want some of that. I want some of
Right.
that big movie business money. Although, they're
Well, but look, Netflix is kicking the movie business, so maybe they're looking
exactly
at the wrong model here.
right. Right. I mean, what happens when a publisher comes along who comes up with a subscription model?
Exactly.
That would be an interesting. How much would you? Now, there's an interesting question. How much would you be willing to pay a month for unlimited books?
Isn't
Delivered
that kind
to
of
you.
what Amazon has a little bit?
Well, Kindle Unlimited. I mean, it's sort of like that, except when you
Okay.
dig into it, it's not as unlimited as they like to make you believe.
Okay.
The catalog. I mean, there's some good stuff in there, but the catalog is not everything.
Okay.
Right. Well, and I think that the important thing there is curated books. We're talking about the things that people are going to be reading.
Yeah.
And it's a really interesting space because Netflix realized this. They walked in and they said, let's make our own stuff and let's get people talking about our stuff. And
Right.
and they realized that they could drive the conversation nationally and globally by just getting out in front of the ball and making their own stuff and making it decent.
Mm-hmm.
And, if you had a subscription service like that for books where you were curating items, you were picking limited numbers of artists, you were making sure that the quality of the media was really good, and you were pushing this stuff out, you could generate the conversation that then turned into the revenue for the subscription service. And it kind of builds itself.
It's an interesting idea because if someone came along and said, I'm going to start a publisher from scratch, built on the subscription model, where we go out and get our own authors, we build up from scratch. Like, again, remember, Netflix in the beginning was other people's content, but eventually they kind of turned a corner and said we can't survive on other people's content, and then that's when Netflix really exploded. House of Cards, I think, was their first big hit. And once people said, "Oh, Netflix original content, what's that? That's not Friends, the reruns, I'll watch that." And suddenly, that's really most of what people watch on Netflix these days. So it's if someone came along and built a publisher along that model, where I'm going to start a new publishing house built around a subscription model, but we're it's not going to be other people's books. It's going to be our curated stuff. And we're gonna have the best quality fiction, science fiction, romance, history, nonfiction, all the different elements, and all for a subscription price. What would you pay? What would you pay for something like that?
I would pay Netflix money for something
I would.
like
Yeah,
that.
absolutely.
Yeah.
$10, $15 a month. Yeah.
Yeah. I think if they found, like Netflix did, got a couple big things where I don't know, like so Netflix, they got some of these Marvel shows and they were just gigantic. If you got, like Stephen King said, I'll do a book for this service.
Right.
Or just some huge author like that, that would kind of pull people in. And we never dreamed a few years ago we'd be watching Netflix the way we do. So who knows?
Well, you could even start your model with like classics that are already in the public domain and say, okay, we're going to curate classics that are in the public domain that kind of represent the thematics that we're going for. So here's the science fiction public domain content that we can share with you, and just get the free content that's available in that public domain arena and share that out. Okay, so this is the kind of science fiction author we're looking for. This is the kind of horror author we're looking for, and then get people to come on board that are willing to write kind of in those veins.
Right.
And there you go. So you got your content already built from the beginning, and then you can really build new content from there.
Yeah, and in fact, it could be a little of both of those things. You get your big name authors, you've got your general available, public domain content, and then your new authors that you're developing on your own, bringing in. I mean, that's an interesting model. I hope somebody does it. I'm going to throw it out there that this is a public domain offering of an idea. So we're on record. I want to see someone try to do that, because it's an interest. I mean, it's certainly not a slam dunk. I mean, you've got to. There's a tricky balance here that you've got to get things rolling fast enough to get the income coming in to support the new authors that will really sustain the system over time. But it's an interesting idea. I'd like to see that. I'd be willing to put some money behind that if a monthly subscription on that if I came around. All right. I like how our initial topics become these they kind of evolve into these interesting things at the end of our discussion. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah, these deeper discussions you talked about at the
There you
beginning.
go.
That's happening.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about. So we're going to move on from that topic, and let's talk about a little bit of something that's in the headlines this week, which is if you're a Mac user, you know that the new Mac OS Catalina is out. Taking a trip to Catalina Island, where you will be stranded if you are using 32-bit apps. The reason I bring it up is Catalina is out, and I'm not upgrading yet. And why is that news? I am a day one upgrader usually. As soon as it's out, I don't usually do the betas. Like, I want my computers to actually work. But when the final version is out, I figure that's good enough for me. I'm ready for it to go, and I do it. But this time around, Catalina is a bigger upgrade than most, and probably even bigger than Apple has really been telling people. I mean, they haven't been hiding the fact that you have to be careful upgrading, but there's more to this upgrade. It's probably the biggest upgrade since they switched from the old PowerPC to the Intel chips back in the day. This is the point at which many things break software-wise. And the reason for that is, without getting into the details too much, we are moving from 32-bit software programming to 64-bit software programming. What does it mean? There's a lot it means. It means the software tends to be more modern, faster, more capable, address more memory, that sort of thing. You don't really need to know what the difference is, except that there is a difference. And while Apple has been supporting the older software for a while now, while warning that it's going away, all those pop-ups you've been getting are that say this software is not optimized for future Macs. That's what this is. So if you have apps still that aren't 64-bit compatible or 64-bit apps, if they're still 32-bit, they won't run. And that's a bit of a big deal. Most of the big software, Office and that sort of stuff, is 64-bit. But there's still some stuff like, if you run a print house and you have a $30,000 machine that's 15 years old, and the company that made the software to run it has gone out of business, you probably have 32-bit software running this giant part of your business. And you'll have to have a Mac running Mojave forever, or as long as you own that equipment. So there is a couple of things you can do to kind of prepare yourself beforehand. One is an app called Go64 from St. Clair Software, and I'll put a link in the show notes. And what it does is it scans your computer and looks for software that is 32-bit. And it will tell you either this software is just not going to work, or it'll say this software relies on some 32-bit things. It may work, but it might not work. For me, it signals on Adobe Creative Cloud software, which includes Adobe Audition, the software I use to edit all these podcasts. So I'm a little worried about that. Now, Adobe, I've looked online, and Adobe says Adobe Creative Cloud 2019 works just fine, but I still see that signal. So I'm going to hold off a little bit. I'm going to hold off to Catalina 0.1 or 2 before. And then there's some other things. Like there's a game I play called World of Tanks, which I just discovered this summer, and a lot of fun. The kids and I love it. And we drive around blowing things up with tanks. I mean, what's not to love? Plus it's educational because all the tanks are historically accurate. And that's my story. I'm sticking to it. And but it doesn't work because it relies on it's a Windows app that runs through some software called CodeWeaver that allows you to run Windows apps on a Mac. But the CodeWeaver people say it's harder to update our software for Catalina than we thought, and it's going to be a while. So I'm kind of holding on that. And I have like my label writer that also prints my stamps. Also keeps telling me that it's not updated. It's just so frustrating. So what do you guys think of all this? Thomas, I know you're running on what?
Linux.
Linux.
Well, I mean, I have Macs at home. Macs are my my bread and butter computers. They're the ones that everybody uses. That like right now, I'm speaking on a Mac. That's what I use for Skype and stuff like that.
Okay.
But we're having a similar problem in the Linux community right now. Come January, Python 2 is being completely killed. And so everything needs to be running Python 3, but a lot of the Linux mainframe is on Python 2. So there's going to be a similar problem come January for us too, where it's like, pick, do you want to run a downgraded version of your thing, or do you want to run the upgraded version and have the chance that stuff's going to break? So I feel you. I am there with you 100%. I know that I've got stuff on here that still runs in 32-bit also, and that the developers just aren't planning on making a 64-bit version of it. And even with this coming up, they just don't have the time to invest in upgrading their software.
Right. So. And there's other software out there you could switch or whatever, but there's always an expense in that and a hassle. Mm-hmm. Even if it was free software, changing your workflow to accommodate, a new way of doing things, because every software is different. It's always a hassle. So, yeah, that's why I'm holding off. Father Michael, what do you think of that problem?
I mean, I'm usually a pretty early upgrader when it comes to these Mac operating systems. I'm glad you mentioned Go 64, because I will see that, because this is my MacBook Air is the computer I use. I don't really use any other computer. I take it to school. It's the one that I use, and so I will definitely be running that and seeing what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much that looks good in Catalina. There's the Catalyst, which means that developers can pretty quickly move an app from iOS to Mac, which is really kind of cool. TripIt has just released a Mac version of their software, which TripIt is that travel software which is really great on iOS and would be really handy to have on a Mac. So there's that stuff. The new iTunes is gone away and been replaced by 3 separate apps: music, podcasts, and all of the syncing stuff. The phone syncing stuff is now in the Finder. And Sidecar, which lets you use your iPad as a second screen for your computer, usually a laptop, obviously. If you're out and about, that would be really neat, and that sort of stuff. I really would love to take advantage of that, but I'm I'm going to hold back. I'm holding off until at least a 0.1 and maybe a 0.2 release. And we'll see, and maybe I'll forego playing World of Tanks for a couple months to my wife's joy.
I'm intrigued about it too, because Mac is one of those companies that prides themselves on not having forked communities. Yep. They are really good about keeping people updated. They are normally in the very high percentage, like the kind of you would want these grades kind of percentage of current mode users or current operating system users.
Right.
So this will be an interesting shift, because it is kind of like drawing a line in the sand and saying, okay, guys, you got to come into this new space. And, Microsoft went through a big upheaval of this, moving from Internet Explorer into the newer age of Edge and all of the Windows 10 and all that kind of stuff. And I'm sure they lost users, but at the same time, they're so huge in the community. You've only really got two operating systems to choose from when it comes right down to it. You're either a Mac user or you're a Windows user for the most part.
For the most part, yeah.
Even as a Linux geek, I recognize that.
Well, and I mean, Windows, it's even worse. I mean, when I worked for the Archdiocese of Boston, I started there in 2008, and they were still running Windows 2000. And we didn't upgrade till Windows XP on our systems until like 2012. Like,
oh, wow.
Oh gosh,
yeah, like XP, like they were just about to turn it off in Microsoft headquarters.
Oh my goodness!
I had a friend in the accounting office who said that when she started there at the Archdiocese in the late 90s, they were still using ledger books for some things. Like,
oh wow!
So the church tends to be a little behind on these things. So. But but Microsoft is notorious for having people who don't upgrade, users who don't upgrade, a large base of it. Apple has always prided themselves on, within 30 days, 75% of our users have upgraded and that sort of stuff. And they make it very compelling. I actually went in and turned off automatic updates on my computer so that it doesn't accidentally update. And it keeps reminding me, hey, these updates are here. I'm like, I know.
Just give me a little bit of time. Let me mourn it.
Yes. Fix my game and I'll come.
Right.
So that's just a little bit of the headline for today. So very good. So let's move on to our picks of the week. Thomas, let's start with you. What's your pick of the week?
All right, so I don't know if this is a new for people kind of thing, but Humble Bundle is really really cool. You've probably heard of it. You might have heard of it in the context of video games. But listen, there are 10 bundles on Humble Bundle right now, and only 2 of them are games, and only 3 of them are directly game related. Okay, so go check out Humble Bundle from time to time. They come up with new bundles every month. You can get some truly fantastic groups of books, some really neat software, some amazing just chunks of things that you need to get started. Like if you wanted to make video games, and I know I'm going with video games, but if you wanted to make video games, they have a Unity package right now that's a mixed media bundle. So it's not just Unity, which is a free program, but a bunch of assets that go along with it that help you make video games more easily. But they also have like a Linux and Unix bundle. So if you wanted to learn about all the stuff that I'm nerding out about, you can go and get that and learn all about the Linux and Unix bundle through O'Reilly. So
Humble Bundle
really
is essentially every day or maybe every week or whatever it is. Maybe they have different lengths of time. They offer a discounted bundle of software. Sometimes it's games. Sometimes it's even just one game. Like they have a Star Wars Battlefront 2 for $5.99 right now, which it's Windows only, so I'm not no temptation there, I guess. There's like you said, there's bundles of things, and the different bundles are different lengths of time. But I've paid attention to it. There isn't a whole lot of Mac stuff that I've run into, but for certain things, it can be really useful. And
they're cheap too. I mean, you're talking about most of it's donation stuff. So what they're doing is they're really running these things. They're having these things offered for free or for a dramatically reduced price to them. And then they have the community buy-in, and they offer the buy-in to a charity. And sometimes it's a charity of your choice. Sometimes it's a charity that's associated with whatever you're buying. But you're only looking at paying, $15, $20 to get the whole bundle. And the whole bundle is like, in the case of some of the books that I've gotten like Python bundles before, and it's been 14, 15 O'Reilly books that, normally retail for $40 a piece. And they're in the bundle for like $20. And
wow.
the $20, not only is it $20, but it's $20 that goes to charity. So it's not even like I'm just paying the machine.
Oh, so that's even better. Yeah. So it's not just you get a deal. You're also supporting charity with it. It says
exactly.
Since 2010, they've donated over $154 million to charity. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I like that. All right. I wish I didn't. I think I must have heard that part of it and forgotten. But they support a variety of pretty good charities, including the Red Cross and Make-A-Wish and some World Wildlife Fund, that sort of thing. So plus others they do. Cool. All right, Father, what's your pick of the week?
Mine's one that, again, people may have heard of before. I go through little spurts of productivity apps and to-do list apps and planning apps, and I've tried lots of them, and I keep coming back to Things by Altered Code. It's complex enough that you can do a lot of different things and repeat things and make different projects and areas of work, but it's not overly complicated. I know I've tried what's the big one?
OmniFocus?
OmniFocus. And I've gotten into it so many times and then just disgusted by it after a week because it's too much. And if you're not deeply into the whole getting things done system, it's not going to work. But Things, I find, is a really good middle ground between just a checklist of things to do and like a good app for planning. And I have it both on my phone and on my Mac, and they sync, and it's just, I find it as a really easy and pleasant way to keep track of the many things I'm supposed to be responsible for, without trying to learn a whole system to get into it. And so Things, I've stuck with that for several years, and I always sort of rediscover how much I like it.
Yeah, I've been an OmniFocus user for close to a decade now, so I'm not going anywhere with that.
Mm-hmm.
That is, but if I were to be switching from something, if OmniFocus went away tomorrow, Things might be the one at the top of the list for me, because I've looked at it and it is pretty cool. I am one of those people who will tell you, if you don't see me write it down in some place, usually in my OmniFocus, it's not going to happen. It's part of my brain.
Very much so, yeah.
Yeah.
As I've gotten into the bullet journaling lately, and it's hard copy, same kind of thing. So
25 years ago, for me, it was the Franklin Day Planner. I've always been this way. But part of the reason people say, you're such an organized person. It's like, no. I'm a very disorganized person who have found ways to compensate for that.
Exactly.
So I have a lot of organizational tools that help me not be disorganized, which is my natural inclination. So that's a great pick, Father. Thank you for that. So my pick this week is a piece of software that might help you when it's time to upgrade to your next operating system. It's called Carbon Copy Cloner. And Carbon Copy Cloner from Bombec Software. That's a hard CH. Bombec is the name. I've heard the developer talk about it. What it does is very simply, it copies your hard drive of your Mac to an external drive. So it creates a bootable copy of your hard drive, so that if something were to happen to your internal hard drive, it will. You could plug in the external hard drive and start your computer up and be back where you were from the beginning. I have it on both my laptop and my desktop, and every day, every night, it makes it. It doesn't do a complete backup. The first time it does a complete backup, and then it incrementally backs up whatever's changed during the day, and it moves the change files into a sequestered part of the drive, so that I can also if you were to just copy it every day. If I didn't realize I'd screwed something up like 3 days ago, that would be gone and I'd still be stuck. This lets me go back and recover some of that stuff over a period of time, depending how big the external hard drive is. So the other thing that I recommend with it is, in addition to doing your daily backups, is before you do an OS upgrade, get a fresh hard drive, a clean drive, whether it's one you've already had or you purchase one that is the size of your internal drive, and I call it my pre-OS upgrade clone. Clone it, label it, stick it in the closet, and it stays there. And if in a month or 2 months something has gone dramatically wrong, or something when I upgraded really messed up a piece of software or really messed up a file, I can pull it out of the closet and bring it back and plug it in and boot up from it, and it's got all the stuff where I was just before I did the upgrade. So that's my recommendation. So Carbon Copy Cloner. There's also another piece of software called Super Duper. They're both really great pieces of software. They're great. They do essentially the same thing. Each has a slightly different feature set, and they are always improving on what they do. Either one will do you well. I preferred Carbon Copy Cloner myself, and so that's my recommendation. So, excellent.
I'll go back to one of your mantras about that too. When you say if you don't have it in 3 places digitally, you don't have it.
Right, exactly. If it doesn't exist in 3 places, it doesn't exist, and you hopefully at least 2 physical different locations, because I still do a Backblaze backup into the cloud of my hard drive as well. Excellent. All right, so let's wrap things up here. Before we do, I want to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create Secrets of Technology, including Jacob J., Jacqueline B., Jeffrey L., Sean L., and Kathy N. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Technology and all the shows at StarQuest. You can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. So that's it from us. What did you think of our discussion about the end-to-end encryption in Facebook, or about ebooks and libraries, or about upgrading to macOS Catalina? Let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com/technology, or the SQPN Facebook page, facebook.com/StarQuestMedia, or send us an email to technology@sqpn.com, and you can find the links to all the articles we've discussed and to our picks of the week on our show notes at sqpn.com. If you have not yet done so, please subscribe to the show in Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, iHeartRadio, pretty much any place you can get a podcast, including on YouTube, the SQPN YouTube channel, where you should hit the bell to get notifications. Until next time, Father Michael Gossett, thank you for joining me in sharing the secrets of technology.
Thanks, Dom.
And Thomas Innerho, thank you as well.
Thanks for having me.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Technology on StarQuest.